Welcome to Muscle Owl Podcast Brexit episode. There we go. That's how I start all the episodes now, with part of Muscle Owl tea. Right. So yeah, Brexit happened. We're all quite, it worked the wrong way around. We're all quite upset about that because we were voting to remain. Although, as many people who have spoken to me since will go, why did you vote to remain? Because I've been trying to say to people, hey, come on, let's move forward now. People have made the decision, made the vote. Let's move forward and stop being upset, mourning, and everything else. So that's what I think that we need to do. But obviously, it's worth reflecting on everything and seeing how things could impact people with disabilities. UK leaving the EU, how could that affect? And then the breakup of the European Union, should this be the first domino in the piece? How will that further effect? So yeah, Zoe Hallam, you're joining us for the first, hopefully the first of many times. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Zoe. I am 25. I'm living in London at the moment. And yeah, Peter has shanghaied me into joining the Muscle Owl team to this podcast because I guess the European Union is something I have fairly strong views on. Whether they are backed up by any facts will remain to be seen, but let's assume that they are. And today we're just going to have a little chat about certain sort of our thoughts on the matter.
Absolutely. And you know the guys from like a long time before you knew me, in fact.
Yeah, a long time. Mercifully.
Were you one of the first trailblazers?
Yeah, I don't think I was quite the first, but I joined in October 2008, so the months after.
That's pretty early.
Pretty early, yeah.
Did you join your national conference, or did you join before?
It was at the national conference.
Michaela eyeballing you.
I remember meeting you then.
Membership.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that was the first time I'd had anything to do with MD UK, and it was only because my dad nominated me for an award. But thanks, Dad, for that, because it's gone well since then. But yeah, that was when I first became aware of the campaign, and yeah, a bright old road since then.
Yeah, you're one of the big ambassadors for the community. Fantastic person. So yeah, essentially, and you're really, in fact, you came along to our Muscle Owl meetup on Saturday, right after the Brexit march, which you were on. How did that go? Was that cool?
Yeah, it was really cool, actually. I think a lot of people were concerned that because it was a march that was going to be populated by a lot of young people and a lot of people who were quite angry and upset about the outcome, that people were going to take advantage of it and make it into more of a riot. But it was actually really good. Everyone was very, very positive about the whole thing, and it was more about just kind of expressing love for the European Union and kind of reinforcing the idea that there's still a lot of people who want to belong to something like that, rather than just being sort of angry at the government or angry at the Leave campaign. It was much more about just getting our voices heard. So that was really good, actually.
I was quite impressed with that. No windows smashed. It was like carnival atmosphere. People
barely any glitter. Oh, it was like a dream.
Trumpets blowing. It was really, really impressive. And Sulaiman was annoyed, sitting inside the whole time while me and Michaela were late to meet him because we got.
Oh, you should have joined. You should have joined the.
I really did, but Sulaiman, we're making more angry. So yeah, Sulaiman and Michaela, what were your views on the whole Brexit, and how do you feel about it at the moment? Obviously, just to start off, there does seem that there was a lot of fear mongering either way. This would happen if we left, if we stayed in, and that was replicated in amongst the disability community or disabled community in terms of benefits cuts, disability rights. I think the main focus that we can really reflect on is that now that it looks like we will leave and Article 50 will be put forward, do we really fear for disabled rights? Michaela?
Yes and no. I always said that if I was voting purely in economics, I probably would have voted Leave. What swayed me to the Remain side was the rights side of things, not just disability rights, human rights in general. if you look at something as simple as being able to fly, every member state must provide support for people who are mobility impaired or wheelchair users or whatever their disability may be.
Flying aeroplanes. Yeah.
No, to get them onto the plane.
Yeah.
So you're just flying generally.
You didn't mean I can't. Continue.
Imagine me flying. So yeah,
we'd never leave the European Union.
Yeah. So yeah, that is one example of a piece of legislation that has afforded me personally rights that I didn't have before policy values, and that comes from the European Union. To my knowledge, there's nothing that is similar in the UK, and I think it's going to be myself an awful lot harder because I'm going to have to have a long look at where the gaps are.
But will these all
tell us where they are, and we're going to have to push them forward. But I think, generally speaking, I am more fearful now than I have been in quite some time. We can say what you want about the Tory government. The Tory government is the Tory government. I'm going to work with them. Like, if it was Labour or Lib Dem or Green or whatever, I'm going to work with them. They're going to have their pitfalls. My concern now is that there's going to be more of an inequality of opportunity based on the fact that the UK are going to be left in this little bubble, and I could travel 50 miles to the south and have a whole different level of protection. How that's going to work in Northern Ireland as well is going to be an interesting thing. To see whether people with an Irish passport are actually going to get EU protection, even if they live in Northern Ireland. So that will also be another interesting angle. But I think in general, it's too early to tell.
You talk about EU protection. What sort of EU protection? My thing is, because as I said, look, I want it to remain, but we're not remaining. Now I'm sort of thinking, is the sky going to fall in? What protections are we talking about? Is the fact that we're letting go of some of the stuff that we have, does that necessarily mean that we won't be able to get it back, on our own terms in terms of rights and everything?
And that's why I think it's too early to tell. I don't think we're at the point yet where we can say categorically, I have lost the ability to have that protection to get me onto an airplane. For a very basic example. There are other examples like being able to live in your own home and not being able to be forced into care. In theory, falls under deprivation of liberty laws, which exist in Northern Ireland, and I think the rest of the UK. In UK legislature, not in EU legislature. So it should actually work out okay that way. I think the problem is that I think where we're going to see the biggest amount of change is within the legal system. If someone brings a legal challenge, we can go to the European Court of Human Rights once Article 50 has been sanctioned and delivered. So that, I think, is where we'll see the biggest change. And I don't know that we can't build those laws into the UK legislature. There was a lot of argument about sovereignty. Actually, a lot of the laws that are in the EU were made by the UK or brought forward by the UK, to my knowledge. So that shouldn't be a major issue. It does release a little bit of a lobbying argument because we've lost that ability to lobby on a much larger scale for an awful lot of a larger amount of people. But actually, at the end of the day, we've fought for this for years. The fight will continue whether we're in the EU or out of the EU. I don't think it really makes not much of a difference. I think it would be better marginally to stay because we already have those protections in place. But if we have to fight for the EU, we will. And eventually, I think we are lucky enough that we have a government that, for the most part, will listen. They might necessarily give them what they're to do straight away. But certainly in Northern Ireland, they'll listen and they'll do their best. And we'll do our best. And eventually we'll arrive at, hopefully, an area where we are in reasonable good protection. We're safe from people trying to shove us into prison cells.
Zoe, Michaela seems hopeful. Why don't you?
I guess it's not that I'm not hopeful. I think everything that Michaela said is definitely possible and definitely feasible within the current government structures that we have. And it certainly wasn't the case that I believed that a vote for Leave will cause the ultimate destruction of the country or anything that dramatic. Despite what the campaigners would have you believe. I think I have a couple of concerns. In terms of welfare and equality, actually, if you look at when the UK introduced various different bills, they were often ahead of the curve on the EU in terms of things like equal pay, workers' rights, maternity, all of that kind of stuff. The UK sort of did its thing before the EU came and said, right now, this is the minimum standard that we're going to expect, which is great. But I think recently, I've noticed a slight U-turn in terms of how socially progressive we're being with a lot of those things. So the key example of that is the desire to scrap the human rights legislation that is, subscribed to by all of the EU and replace it with the British Bill of Rights, which to me is kind of like, why would we do that unless we didn't want to be bound by those restrictions in some way? Why do we want it to be a British Bill of Rights unless there's something in the European legislation that we don't like, that we find too restrictive? And so my concern is perhaps that we're now moving away from being ahead of the curve on social equality and welfare, and actually we might end up now falling behind the EU in terms of that. And without the EU there to sort of safeguard those rights, and without the EU there to keep pushing things forward and keep pushing that sort of socially progressive agenda, we have much less incentive and certainly much less international pressure on us to keep up with what's going on and to keep up with what's seen as acceptable in terms of welfare. And that obviously includes disability, but all sorts of other things like women's rights and the rights of LGBT people and the rights of ethnic minorities and all of that kind of thing. So, and again, this isn't anything that's for certain, this isn't anything that's been proven, but the way kind of we were going before this vote implies to me that we might not be going in the right direction there, and without the EU there's much less incentive to sort of reverse that kind of trend. So that's a big concern for me. I agree that I think it's important that we have some kind of additional area of authority above our own government that can be appealed to, not always successfully, and it does take a long time, and yes, it's very clunky, but the fact that it's there, I think, is often enough to get people to kind of think about quite carefully what they're doing in terms of legislature and how they're applying legislation to businesses and to other organisations. Without that there, I think there might be a tendency to think we're off the hook a little bit with that.
Yeah, I think I worry too that this, I sort of see it more in terms of an ideological point of view, that actually, ideologically, this thing that seems to have forced the vote to leave is almost the working class, small towns or smaller cities outside London of wanting to get their sovereignty back, wanting to get their wealth back. And that, to me, pushes much more to laissez-faire, free structure of being able to do what you want, when you want, without having to abide by pesky things like human rights laws or disability rights or anything like that. So I sort of think that this could be the main sort of spook of all of this is actually, is this where we're leading? Is it? It's not that actually there's an agenda against disability rights, but it sort of seems to me right now is that the agenda that, or the path that we're leading down, or the avenue that we're leading down, might well just, do its thing completely irrespective of disability rights and rights.
I mean, disability rights just won't be on the agenda is the thing. Like, it's, to kind of factor in disability rights into things that you do, it's costly, it takes time, it takes money. Nobody wants to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a pain, we cause inconvenience for people. But at the moment, we have to be included, they have to do, make all the reasonable adjustments that are required by law, however grey that area might be. But I mean, in my experience, I haven't really come across anyone who's kind of done that because, out of the goodness of their heart, or because they felt personally it was the right thing to do. They've done it because they have an obligation to do so under law. And if that starts getting swept under the carpet, then I agree. It's a slightly worrying precedent. If people start focusing much more on their own kind of individuality and their own ability to do whatever it is they want, then those of us who are in minority groups, those of us who require a bit more support, are not going to get that. I worry in the same way.
See, it makes me think if there was an article the other day, I can't even remember where you read it, but it talked about how society...
The Sun. You're always reading The Sun, Michaela. You probably...
No, definitely not The Sun. But it was written in such a way that it was written, and it's how society was built in such a way that it was restrictive. And yes, society may be restrictive, but actually we I suppose maybe even before the vote, certainly since the vote, we've seen almost a slight hint of every man for himself and to hell with everybody else. And that worries me more than anything, because I think if we have a culture like that, and that isn't the majority regardless of many things, it's not the majority of people thinking like that, or acting like that for that matter. But if we start to believe that it is the majority, and government start to believe that it is the majority, my concern is actually, are we going to then start retreating to that mentality and say, you know what, make your own way through, because I had to enter proper building. If you're going to build it with 5 steps, it's not going to happen. But if you're going to build a new building, build it with a flat entrance, and I'm not able to get any contribute and pay back whatever. But that every man for himself mentality is starting to see through, and that, I think, is almost the most concerning part for me.
And in fact, if we impoverish the broad scope of society, then we almost force them to not care about morality or disability rights, because they have to care about themselves first. For me, it just goes back to when we were at the APPG a few weeks ago. It was about the taxi companies and the bus companies were all getting heckled for not having accessible stuff, and it's like, actually, this is a society that only incentivizes profit. If it's only going to incentivize profit, and things are going to be really, really tight, then they're not going to be able to do both things at once. They're going to have to just choose profit. And that, for me right now, I'm sort of, I'm sort of taking on this idea of this argument, because no one likes to draw parallels to sort of Weimar Republic Germany or 1930s or anything, but you can see, I can certainly see in this country right now, lots of people who feel like they don't have opportunities, who feel like they don't have wealth, who feel like a lot of their opportunities and their wealth have been taken from them by the upper classes, by the 1% in society. And as that 1% gets richer and the 99% get poorer, people start to blame each other. Just like the media pushes. And that's the thing. I think that's the most dangerous thing for disability rights and disability representation right now. If it was a straight, flat out, hey, you're not doing this thing anymore, this law, abiding by this EU rule, that it would just be a sort of an A to B type thing. Oh yeah, that's wrong, isn't it? But I think it's almost like it's so indirect that it has the potential to be quite dangerous. It's almost that, as we said before, that path, walking down that path of slowly letting go of rules and regulations that have held us back, that have prevented opportunities. The minute that they allow opportunities to flourish for the self, for every man for himself mentality, they then, we then don't look after the vulnerable people in society and people who need to be supported.
Yeah, and if you think about that as well, I mean, one of the other things that's really concerned me about the Leave campaign in general, but also what we've seen since you voted Leave, is this tendency, this requirement to kind of to other people to sort of say, here's us, here's the things that we like and the things that we stand for, and then there's everyone else who doesn't want what we want, and therefore they're a problem. We need to blame them. We need to, and for a long time, actually, the EU was the problem, right? A lot of people blamed the EU for a lot of their problems, a lot of their issues, and now they don't have the EU to blame anymore. So you sort of start to wonder, okay, who's going to be the next? Who's going to be the next call? You can't blame immigrants anymore if we've left the EU. You can't blame free movement of people if we don't have that. So now where are
waiting to be blamed, Zoe?
Yeah, who's it going to be? I mean, it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that it's going to end up being people like us, people who take welfare benefit from the state. I mean, there's all sorts of things that we start going, okay, where's the finger going to land now?
When are we going to blame the rich people? When are we going to blame the people in power? This is the thing. Look at the person who and go, does this person have power? If they don't have power, then you can't blame them.
But at the same time, I argue that actually we can't blame anybody, because at the end of the day, politics should be about people on the ground. I mean, we look at the Labour Party. The Labour Party may well be in free fall.
Oh, but that's a defeatist attitude, Michaela. That's not going to serve people. That's not going to serve disability rights.
It's a lovely thought.
So people should blame themselves.
But this is the thing, like, the Labour Party is in free fall, whatever. But the reason there's no leadership challenge is because Jeremy Corbyn's going to easily win with a landslide of supporters, which to me is what politics is about. It's about people on the ground saying, this is what I want. And say I was an MP, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. And I would go to my people and say, hey, what do you want? And that is what I did to my program. That at the end of the day is the idealistic version of how politics should work. But if it worked like that, nobody would be to blame. And that troubles me. To me, we shouldn't actually have to blame anybody. If we all actually started to work together, and it could be my accent, I admit. But if we did things the way they were meant to be done, we wouldn't be in a position where people went, hey, it's your fault. And we wouldn't be building walls in Mexico and whatever else is going on.
So we blame those people who don't want to work along with it. And that's the thing. But
then even if they don't work along with it, it should still work. Because
you're too forgiving, Michaela. Tell them to go out. Leave the room.
And even if people come in with what I would feel is destructive sense of decision making to do something bad, like make every building have to have stairs in a really simplistic way. All right, that's one of the people who will find it. We'll find another way. I am endlessly optimistic when it comes to that because I've spent 8 years of my life lobbying for changes, and I've seen the changes that can happen when people actually work the way it's supposed to work. I've seen whatever many points at your national service, which is a tiny amount of money really, but it's made a huge difference to people's lives in Northern Ireland. I've seen airlines change their policies. I've seen buses get better. I've seen the bus company down the road for me build better buses. It can happen, but it's only happening because people actually sit down together and they discuss actually what are the options, what's the best option for everybody around the table, and let's go with it. It's a compromise, and I don't think we have any of that in society at the moment.
That's what I think is worrying me right now. If that's in fact, from this conversation, it's made me think, in fact, if society now does continue to get poorer, we will continue to sort of have to fend for ourselves and think less on a moral standpoint. I guess that is, the irony is that it never actually happens, really. But that's what wealth affords. Wealth affords the ability to be moral and the ability to be philanthropic. Yeah. Zoe, do you want to finish us off for the episode? And we'll come back to we'll keep talking about this next week and the week after, and until we're certain that this.
Until we know everything. Until we've
It's been a very Orwellian episode. Aldous Huxley's going to pop out the corner and tell us his all apart. Go on.
Yeah, I guess this is the thing. I think, under the right circumstances, with the right leadership, with the right people at the table, the negotiations around leaving the EU and sort of stepping out on our own and doing our own thing, they could be a good thing for the UK. They could be something that is a step in the right direction. But I don't believe that we will be putting the right people around the table. I don't believe that we will be approaching the negotiations in the right way. I'm very concerned that we're going to end up either going far too hard on the EU and trying to bully them into accepting the terms that we want, which is not going to work because at the end of the day, they're a 27 block country and we're a small island, 2 islands. Or we will just end up with what is basically the same conditions of the EU that we have now, but with much less power on the inside to negotiate the things that we need, to veto things that don't suit us, and to kind of to be a part of it. And we'll be basically an outsider looking in. We'll get some of the scraps from their table, but we won't have the same. We won't have the same position. We won't have the same recognition. We won't have the same relationship with all those other countries that we once did. I mean, I think that's inevitable. It's never going to be the same again now. Even if Brexit doesn't go through, even if for whatever reason they don't invoke Article 50, we fundamentally damaged our relationship with the European Union, and that upsets me because that's not what I wanted. And I I really struggle to see how we're going to negotiate our way out of this in a way that is not damaging to the country.
In fact, you touched on something that's really important. I'll make it as one of the last points here, is that abuse often happens behind closed doors. And I think that's something that by ostracizing ourselves from a bigger community, I feel that we've actually sort of thinking about it, socially and society wise, we've opened ourselves up to a lot more possibilities of abuse because we're no longer in that bigger party where everyone's watching. We're sort of, we are in the corner, so if things start going all, whatever, there's no one looking in. That's what kind of worries me. Zoe, do you want to finish that off?
Stop asking me to finish off. You're just going to jump on something I said again.
That was the final point.
I think we've covered pretty much everything. I think at the end of the day, we are now at the precipice of either something really big and really good, or something really big and really bad. It's up to the government, to the people at large, because people have power, whether they believe it or not. There is magic to be had if we can just grasp it.
Oh, I like it. That's what I call it.
There's
magic to be had if we can only just grasp it.
I'm going to watch Once Upon a Time before I podcast it.
Right, that's fantastic. Thank you all for our first Brexit episode. Hopefully, we won't have to do too many more. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.